So as promised, this is game number 1 of this best of 3. I'm Madals. Thank you all very much for tuning in if you're watching live on Twitch, for watching the VODs if you're on YouTube, or wherever else you may have discovered this video. So, this is going to be some TVP, a matchup which I haven't cast much of lately. I seem to have been getting Zergs, tons. And of course, before you get in there are a lot of Zergs, as always. But anyway, let's introduce these two players. Playing for Cascade, we've got ArotaX. ArotaX? Yeah, ArotaX, that's what I'm going with. And his opponent, up to the top right, the yellow Protoss player, representing Alien Invasion, it is CPU. So, this should be a good fun little game. Nice little bit of PvT. Terrans, of course, at the moment, there is some murmuring that they're doing rather well for themselves, and late game you have to be a god to be able to beat a Terran player as a Protoss, but I don't like getting drawn into these balance threads and the discussions on what's overpowered and what isn't. Personally, I think none of you know what overpowered is until they bring in Xel'Naga as the 4th playable race, and then you'll all appreciate what OP really feels like. So, in terms of what these guys are opening with, it looks like we're going to be getting some Reaper play coming down from ArotaX. He's chucking down racks into Refinery. Meanwhile, CPU, he's gone Gate Gas. Very normal stuff. Really can't expect much else. This pylon position is actually pretty cool. It means that if a Reaper were to come in, he's just got a bit more vision of where it could be. Always important, getting that map vision and ramp vision and cliff vision if you're up against Reapers. Otherwise, yeah. First Reaper should be about to pop on out once the 50 gas is hit. There we go, right on cue. Up against Protoss, of course. Reapers, they're not there to deal tons of damage. They're there to predominantly scout and get information. That's their biggest purpose, and they usually tend to do it quite well. So, just going to keep an eye on what the little Reaper's going to be up to, and try and just get a good idea of where any damage can be done. And more importantly, if the damage is done, how many probes are killed. If you get a probe, you're usually feeling pretty happy, and the reason you're not going to be getting more than usually just one probe is because of the fact that obviously a mothership core and also a stalker can make their way out onto the field nice and early for Protoss, which just pretty much straight counter anything that Reapers are capable of doing. So Mr. Reaper just going through his little adventure across the map right now, going to be trying to find out exactly what CPU is up to, and CPU, he's just taken his natural base at the moment, and yeah, this is pretty chill time for him. He's got the Cybernetics core coming out, he's got Warp Gate Tech and his Mothership core already there, so right on cue, that Mothership core should be able to prevent the Reaper from doing too much. So, natural base for both of these two coming on down. We're looking to get into a fairly normal position as far as a PvT kits. A couple of additional barracks coming on down, so not a tech-heavy approach from ArotaX. Instead, he is just going to be going and just pumping out a lot of Marines in case there was anything like an Oracle coming along. Just got to keep a check really on anything else that he may sneakily be trying to do. Interesting positioning of this robotics facility actually from CPU. This is something that ArotaX may not be able to see. Depends whether he goes over there with the Reaper, but I doubt it because the Mothership core is in too much of a good position. We'll wait and see. Keep a good check on it. Stalker, though, coming out should prevent that Reaper from getting in and getting any scouting down. The Reaper may actually be able to knock out this debris. Does take it down at long last. Is he going to lose his own life in exchange for that, though? Yes, he does. So that Reaper didn't really achieve too much. Didn't get any scouting information that was important. Only really managed to deduce that it wasn't going to be a one base all-in. So the Marines now just chilling at the top of the ramp, waiting patiently in case anything tried to come and sneak on up, a couple of stalkers or anything like that. Marauder also coming down, but it's Stim being researched first, so it's not going to be a super quick concussive shell style timing that a lot of Terrans do quite like overall up against Protoss players. Meanwhile, a couple more gates also getting thrown into the mix here. The first Immortal hopping on down. So, interesting strategy coming down from CPU, quite tech heavy at the moment. He hasn't actually scouted his opponent yet. And there's going to be a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, CPU is going to feel relatively confident that his opponent can't do anything too crazy off the back of a Reaper play. It's most likely going to be this follow-up push that you see pretty much every series if you are a Protoss up against a Terran. This is predominantly just pushing across to try and soak up some Mothership core energy. First model is out. This is where the scout's going to come on through. There's the Photon Overcharge. It reveals the Immortal. It does mean that 2 Marines get taken down, a third, possibly a fourth could also die. There's no concussive shell, remember, so the Stalkers can chase this down across the map. This is meaning that a lot of Marines are going to die. Stim is nowhere close to finished. You can't engage the Stalkers without concussive shell. And so this is actually some quite bad times for ArotaX. He's having to go into a full retreat, but he's losing a lot of resources just from these Marines getting picked off. In total, 500 resources down for doing no damage at all, only triggering a Photon Overcharge and getting a scout down on the Immortal. The Robotics Bay is completed though, so the first Colossus production going to get started for CPU nice and quick. And note that ArotaX is having to chuck down a bunker just to make sure that he's very secure. CPU sending in an observer gets to see all of that. Also, thanks to holding this watchtower in the center, able to see the fact that a lot more Marauders are coming across the map and there's going to be a follow-up push. Of course, there is still going to be enough energy for another Photon Overcharge by the time this hits. There's also the Immortal down on the field, but just the one at the moment. Not an astounding amount of units to defend against this. The Photon Overcharge preemptively triggered, just trying to buy some more time. The Marauder comes up the ramp, going to try and engage into this. The Immortal does need to be very careful. Gets focused down quickly. ArotaX taking out the sentries, a good target to take, and just picking apart pretty much everything. May just try and stim straight through here into the main base. Here's what it's gunning for. And ArotaX should be able to get a good amount of damage done. A couple of Zealots trying to get whooped in. The first Colossus is soon going to pop on out, but these Marauders with stim and the Marines are dishing out a lot of DPS, trying to pick apart any probes they can find. They've already racked up 5 worker kills. They will all fall. And in terms of the resources lost, that was a very cost-efficient trade for ArotaX. The Immortal, the Stalkers, the Sentries, a lot of gas goes down the pan for CPU, as well as a couple of probes. So, all in all, that has leveled out the game quite significantly. The only downside, though, is that medevac production has been hindered by going for that aggression, pumping up that many Marauders. So, by lowering the medevac count in this early stage of the game, it has a side effect, and that means that getting down any Vikings is also going to be substantially harder than it may otherwise be. So, it's something that can easily be rectified by chucking down an additional starport, as ArotaX is doing now. CPU, he's feeling quite safe though. He knows that his opponent will have had to have skipped quite a few medevacs in order to go for that push. So he jumps out with that third base, knowing that his Colossus are going to reign somewhat supreme over the next couple of minutes without a counter in the form of those Vikings. Double drop going to be making its way across the map. CPU doesn't see it. Will of course see it now, as these 2 medevacs come on down and say, nope, you are not having that pylon. The concern for CPU is, while he does have the powerful units in the form of the Colossus, is he's very much limited overall in terms of his army value. He's got a couple of those Colossi, but not much support for them. 4 Stalkers, a Sentry, and 3 Zealots. Needs a couple more waves of warp-ins from the numerous warp gates if he's going to actually be able to trade this too much. So, still checking around, still trying to make sure where these 2 decide to go. Keeping a good check on whether this third base is going to be able to survive. I don't think it will, actually. The amount of damage this small clump of infantry can do is huge. Forces the cancel. No third base for CPU. He also loses a pylon. Not the end of the world, but a little bit irritating. Warp Prism coming on down from CPU as well now as he chases down this infantry. Not going to be able to catch it. Interestingly, even more heavy teching coming down from CPU as he starts up his Templar archive. So playing this rather greedy actually. He's only sitting at 6 warp gates, which when he was going up to 3 bases is pretty low. Very reliant on these Colossus, but look at the Viking count. It's climbing pretty rapidly. 4 Vikings per production cycle from those 2 starports, and actually the Colossus suddenly start to look vulnerable. There's 6 Stalkers, that's all that is really on the map to defend against the Vikings and try and zone them out, but in the sheer volume of Vikings that will be out on the field in a quick space of time, those Stalkers aren't going to be enough to really stop it. A little bit of trickle damage coming on through, finding the odd proxy pylon, just chipping away at it. Little things like that can actually be very solid. It just disrupts your opponent from what they're attempting to do for the most part. Do you have a Warp Prism? Looking to go for a little bit of Zealot dropping. Important to note that there isn't actually a third CC coming down. So this is a very aggressive play from ArotaX. Should be looking to end the game outright. War Prism comes across, is going to see that factory, checks to see if there is a third base. Won't see one, so going to look and come and drop into the main. Potentially will wait until after this move out comes. The observer can see it. This is a very large push forward. CPU, if he's keeping an eye on this, may get a little bit concerned actually by just the sheer size of that army. Should be able to buy himself some more time though with this Zealot drop. Will force the army to come back in order to deal with it. A couple of SCVs getting taken out. Buying time is the big thing that CPU is able to do here. Every second really does count for him. It allows him to get out a few more gateway units. Allows him to pump up a bit more of a defense, get a couple of Archons in the mix. And that's going to be essential for him. Because this move out, the boys are getting pulled. This is an all-in. And I know it's 15 minutes, and you're going all-in in 15 minutes? Yeah, it is. ArotaX has to win here. Looking at CPU's army, he's going to have a rather tough engagement. If we're honest, the Viking count is up at 13. That's to deal with 3 Colossus. Mothership Core needs to get some good time warps. There's not much in the way of anti-air. The Colossi are just melting to this. They've got no choice but to retreat away. ArotaX pushing on forward. The Zealots trying to close up the distance, but down go the Colossus like butter. Those Vikings dishing out so much damage against them. ArotaX pushing forward. CPU is in a nightmare of a position right now. His Zealots trying to back away. The Vikings have just come and landed up the ramp. They're dishing out any damage that they can. One Archon remains, gets picked off quickly, and this is it. This is GG. There's not really anything that can be done here. A counterattack is coming through from the Zealots, but the sheer volume of infantry is far too high. The SCVs being pulled weren't even really utilized. There wasn't a need for it. CPU is doing all that he can to try and stay in this game. He's got a couple more units warping in. But ultimately, the reason you know it's over is because CPU has a couple of Stalkers. One of these command centers could lift up and float away somewhere, and there wouldn't be really much that CPU could do about it. The infantry, on the other hand, 76 army supply to 44. Medevac slowly healing it all up. CPU doing everything that he can to try and swing the tide of this fight, but he needs a bit of a miracle at this stage. His third and final base is going to get taken down. CPU has got enough money to build another Nexus, but he's not going to. Pushing in, trying to take a fight, bringing the Stalkers from behind. The sheer numbers, though, for ArotaX are too high. He pushes forward, takes down the Archon, GG, and ArotaX will be victorious in game number 1 of this best of 3.